I've uploaded the draft budget document as well as the PowerPoint presentation to your Dropbox. It's under council packets, and then I created a subfolder called budgets, subfolder for that called 2015-16, and there you'll find both documents.
Say that again, city council, council packets.
Budgets.
Budgets,
Budget.
2015-16.
Thank you.
You should have a full one.
I'm gonna go sit over there and grab seats when you sitting over there.
Let's set some mood here. Some very light on.
Look at Dan, all excited because he gets you a PowerPoint. All excited because he gets you a PowerPoint.
Now, I don't have that big movie projector screen like we had last week.
Well,
Still crying inside on that.
I was going to give preface. I mean, all management staff worked really hard to get it in this budget, but Dan has been able to come down and put it all together. So I want to thank Dan for all that work. And as you'll see, we've got a balanced budget.
All right. So again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We're presenting to you the city manager's recommended budget for the 2015-2016 fiscal year. And this is your first glimpse at the budget. It's in draft form. All the numbers are programmed as is being recommended by the city manager. But there's still a lot of work to do on the document itself as far as just formatting and cleanup. And some of the departments still are working on their accomplishments and goals, accomplishments from last year, goals for the coming year. So all those still need to be included in the document. Right now, they're just placeholders for them. But as we go through, I want you to focus kind of on generalities. As you have any questions that come up, please feel free to ask them in stride. We'll have a Q&A session at the end that's reserved as part of this presentation, which you can ask any of the department heads, the city manager, anything you want that comes to mind. But this is just an introductory first glimpse at the budget. We will be bringing it back to the next regular council meeting for further consideration, usually with recommendation of adoption at that point, unless the council decides that they want to continue exploring the budget, ask more questions before they make a decision like that. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk about the schedule that we followed preparing this budget. We started a lot earlier than in years past, and we'll talk about why we did that in a moment. We'll talk about the document itself, so for the new council member, how to read it, where things are presented, how they all tie together. We'll just kind of go and do a general overview of that. We'll talk about the approach we took this year to this budget. In years past, we focused on specific things. This year was no different in that approach, but what we focused on was different than say last year. I'll present highlights for this year's budget. We'll do a little bit of analysis, walk through the major funds, talk about where they are, where we project them to be, and then we'll end up with a Q&A. Again, I would be happy to accept any questions that come to mind as we go along, but if you want to stay with me, you're more than welcome to. And again, all the department heads are here as well. If you have any questions about operations, about the capital plans, anything of that nature. Any questions before we begin? Everyone got the document, hopefully they can see it, as well as the PowerPoint. All right. So as I alluded to a moment ago, we started this process much earlier than in years past. And it's not after, but we really started talking budget in December. Usually that's when we reserve time to talk about mid-year adjustments and where we are, depending on where we thought we were going to be and so on and so forth. But this year we said, we need to start early. And the reason we did so is because we wanted to really build this funding strategy, this budget from the ground up. We wanted all elements of the city involved. So every department was tasked with meeting with their staff. And we developed a series of questions that we asked staff in an attempt to not only get a sense of what their needs were and what they would like to see done in the coming year, but also to gauge just overall sentiment about the organization, sentiment about the community, sentiment about what their hopes and dreams of both the organization and community would be. And we thought that would give us context to help us put these numbers together in a meaningful way that's not just focused on one thing. Last year was all about capital. The years prior was all about just trying to weather the storm. This year we wanted to really right the ship and say we need to move down a path that has some background that guides our formulation of this budget. So we did that and collected all that information in January, and then we began to digest it. And we began to think about, okay, how are we going to focus our goals and our strategies with those comments from staff in mind. And we even had a quarterly staff meeting, all staff meeting, where we asked the same kind of questions of staff. We kind of came back and said, you know, we discovered this in our talks with you. That seemed to be ubiquitous from department to department, because we did these independently. And we brought all this information together, but there was some common themes and common trends that we were seeing from the comments we received back from our staff. And so we put it back out to them, and Margaret said, this is what we've heard, and this is what we see, and asked for them to comment further on it. Then we had our budget meeting with you, the council, in March, where we talked about strategy and goal setting. And we outlined strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, the whole SWOT analysis with each of these goals that we've identified. And in the past, the city had 5 overarching goals. This year, council indicated that they wanted to maintain those 5 overarching goals, but they wanted to be very specific about objectives and how they play in those 5 goals. And so we took a look at that and said, okay, we'll keep those 5 overarching goals in the background, but now we're going to target specifically the council wants to be done that relate probably all of them at once, not maybe just one in particular, but all of them combined. And then in April, we began the process of meeting with departments and say, okay, these are the goals, these are the strategies we're looking to pursue, this is what we've heard from staff, these are the priorities for council. Start building your budgets, departments, put your numbers together, tell us what it's going to cost to do certain things, and then the fun really began. Each department votes the city manager twice. The first one is to present their budgets, and we digest that, we compare to revenues once revenue estimates are prepared by the finance department, and then they have a second meeting. And our running joke is Margaret has a wonderful little tool that was given to her at a Christmas party years ago, and every department that puts their hand on the table and they spread their fingers, and then we begin the negotiations. And she takes her wonderful tool and she just kind of places it right there in front of her. And we, through that process, work through and eventually come out with what we consider is a balanced budget, meeting the goals and objectives of the council, what staff has set, in a sustainable way. As you'll see in a moment, departments costed a lot this year. We are moving in a good direction, both revenue-wise and in our attempts to control cost. So they requested a lot. They wanted to take advantage of that. A lot of capital projects that they put out there. Everything fit to the mold of what council wants to see done. But obviously, we don't have the resources to do all that. So we had to trim quite a lot away. And we really put it back on departments. And Margaret said, I want you to tell me what is your highest priority? What makes the most sense this year? What is the most strategic use of the resources that are available? What's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck? And so in that second meeting, they came back, they spread their fingers, and we got to that end product. And then here we are in June. This will be the first workshop that we have scheduled for the budget. The next one is the regularly scheduled council meeting. Our goal is always to have a budget adopted by July 1st, and what we'll have as many meetings as are necessary, as the council deems necessary, to finalize this process. On to the document itself. 256 odd pages of pure enjoyment and love. A lot of love in this document. It starts with the city manager's budget message. This is where the city manager makes an attempt to narrate the process, narrate what the budget is about for the coming year, express her concerns, her goals, her aspirations, and how the whole document ties together to meet the goals and the objectives of the council and staff have set. It's broken into additional sections that summarize the budget. So you'll find a summary section followed by charts and graphs, which give you kind of that picture, that context of revenues and expenditures citywide across all funds, then just focused on the general fund. A little bit of water and sewer peppered in there. And then it goes into the detail section. So we first start out with funds. We look at each fund in detail. We talk about their revenue sources and their expenditures, and then how each department draws on those resources. Then we switch gears and we talk about the department side. each department, where they draw their funding sources from, what they spend their money on. Then we follow that up with our 5-year CIP budget, capital improvement budget. And this one was developed and adopted by council 2 years ago, so we're now in year 3. And it's supposed to tie to the summary page for CIP in the summary data section, in the sense of the 5-year projects we identified in this part, how does it relate to what's going to be done in the coming year? But a lot of stuff was added. That wasn't in the 5-year plan. We're going to revisit the 5-year plan next year, update it, give it a new glossy look. But departments, it's a fluid process, and this year departments identified things that were not in the 5-year plan that needed to get done. And so we attempted to program those. You'll find those in the summary data, but they don't necessarily correlate to the 5-year plan, but they should. Following that, then we have appendices which give us our information about personnel changes, GAN limits, requirements, debt service schedules, all that good stuff. Kelly would like to make a few comments about the personnel schedule at the end of my talk. If you have any questions about that as well, feel free to ask her.
Yeah, just a little bit about the CIP. You know, we're projecting now to do a 5-year, and eventually we're going to do a 20-year CIP plan. But it is, we try to get as much information as we can, but, you know, like Dan said, there's things that, you know, don't think about when we're doing it together that come up, and so we have to adjust to that. So, but each year, we're going to try each year to review it and make updates to it. It hasn't been updated for 2 years now, but next year, it's the
Any questions so far about how to read the document? What it's telling you? It's perfect for electronic reading. So you have a tablet, computer, a giant movie screen projector, whatever you want to do to look at it, that's the best way, as opposed to printing out a hard copy.
You know,
we don't have $30,000 unfortunately this year to buy one of those, but maybe next year. There's always hope. I'll ask Santa. But the document electronically is bookmarked. The table of contents is functional, so you can click anywhere in the table of contents and take you directly to that section you want to go. The bookmarks act in a similar fashion, but it's more detailed. And again, it's ideal for electronic devices. So we only print off maybe 2 copies because it's so large, and rarely anybody ever pick it up off the wall and see all to read. So it makes the most sense to have electronic. But if anybody would like a hard copy, we'd be happy to
We
provide that.
do make one for every department, so all the employees have access to it. You know, I know it's online, but sometimes it's easier to have a document there, so we did do one for public works, police, and then there's another copy here, so everybody has access to it.
So every 2 copies is a ream of paper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Over.
Well, we print it front and back, so
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's
we
about
were
all.
trying to do our
That's it.
environmental stewardship.
But if a council member wants to print a copy, please let us know, you know, we'll make one for you.
We used to print them for everybody, and
Yeah.
then the draft and the final, and
Yeah.
they were so.
And 8 trees get cut down.
Yeah, but, you know, I know some people just prefer to read it in a book like form, so we have no problem making a copy for you, if you prefer it that way.
We present information in the budget, whether you're looking at the fund level, summary data, or the department level, by major category. So revenues we block together in things like taxes, charges for service, grants, subventions, other revenue, that sort of thing. Expenditures, we have 5 major categories that we block everything into. Salaries, benefits, operations, loans, grants, debt service, and capital outlay. So we try to keep it as detailed as possible without being overloaded. If you have any questions about what goes into the numbers that you see, please feel free to ask. I'll provide even more data if you so desire. We already went through this, how to read the funds, revenue source, expenditures. We do include 2-year projections at the fund level, where we think the funds will be 2 years out, based on where we think revenues would be, expenditures. The general fund, water, sewer funds are set as far as estimations. There's still some work to be done on the special revenue side, but those are primarily grant-driven type of funds. And so grant funds are expenditure-driven, we have to spend them to get it, so it just takes a little bit more work to sort that out. And again, I want to reiterate, each fund section shows how the department is using the fund, or at least how much money it's drawing from that fund. So if you have any questions about how that works, please feel free to ask. On the department side, it's the same type of method and presentation, but there's detail given as to what the department does, what its accomplishments were for the year, what the outcomes were related to those accomplishments. So in other words, how did it benefit the community from them accomplishing something, or do they have any comments about it? Those are you'll find in that section. And then they also have goals and objectives for the coming year. Again, that were derived from what management and council discussed at the council's goal setting session, as well as talks with city staff, what they want to see. Those things were supposed to be encapsulated, those goals are supposed to encapsulate all of that. And then it follows into budget detail for each department. The overview again for the department tells us what the department does as a core function. What does it do day to day? The goals are more or less on top of that, special things. And we really try to control that this year because staff has been so overloaded in the last couple of years trying to get us in a good position fiscally and operationally, that we really tried hard to make sure that no one was trying to put too much on the plate. We didn't want to add another thing to the file. We wanted to try and streamline it. We wanted to try to make things more manageable. So what we're presenting here is this is what they do day to day, an overview, and then these are the goals, these are the additional things that they're going to attempt to support the council goals that we mentioned earlier. Sections of note in this lengthy document, again, we have a summary section preceded by the city manager's budget message. This budget message is in draft form. This is her first attempt to communicate with the council and community about what the goals are, approach to this budget was for the coming year, but it's still a work process depending on what the council comes back with and gives us feedback on from this session to the next. And then citywide summary information, the beginning of the summary section might be of particular interest. There's a great page in there, and I'll show it here on my presentation of per capita spending. So if anybody's wondering, well, how much does the city spend on every man, woman, child who calls away from home? You have that information. We have the current year CIP expenditure schedule, a full summary of what projects are going to be attempted, which might be of interest. And then again, I mentioned personal schedule back in the appendix that Kelly will make a few comments about later. So our approach this year, as I mentioned, we started earlier. We want to get more feedback. We want to get more buy-in from staff. It was much more collaborative, I would say, this year because of that. Because we went back to them twice, asking staff, what do we need? What would you like to see? How do you feel about the organization and the community? What can we do in this coming year to better things, to make things even more desirable as a community? We were more strategic in the sense that in years past, we were really trying to weather the storm, followed by a big push for capital. This year, we're looking at the future saying, okay, how do we position ourselves well to meet what we know are the challenges coming the following year and the year after. I have an update for you as well on our discussion of professional obligation bonds, which I'll get to at the end here. But things move so fluidly, even that has changed now. But we took that into consideration in the building. City manager's overarching message, I think, for this coming year is we got to complete what we started. We don't want to add more stuff, more projects than what we already have this coming year. We want to really focus on completing what we started, seeing through. So project completion, program completion is a big focus. We wanted to continue to emphasize efficiencies, finding ways of doing things better, leaner, because again, we're trying to position ourselves for future years. And we're taking a look at how we deliver services, how we can enhance that delivery, how we can streamline it. And our prime example right now is what we're doing in the development department and the work that Kevin's doing to try and make that whole function more effective, better communicative elements with community. We're trying to tell a story in this budget. It's not just a legal document, it's not just a bunch of numbers. We're trying to show where we think policies and the direction the council has set how it looks in the context of financial information. So again, operating efficiencies and cost control is probably the number one thing we looked at this year. Followed by economic development. The focus still remains heavily on economic development. City manager recommended an increase to that division's appropriation from last year as we continue to lead the way in economic development in the region. And then there's still a large component of this budget that's devoted to infrastructure and capital, but in the context of just completing projects that we started. A big one would be the Main Street revitalization. We got $2 million sitting in the bank that's ready to go. But that project has been moving forward, albeit a little slowly because of changes not only in cost, but also changes in the plan. But those types of things we're looking to really sink our teeth into the final finish those out. Here are the citywide goals that council adopted 2 years ago. Some of them we feel kind of overlap, but they all are intended to not only bolster service delivery and staffing, but also focus on economic development, regional cooperation, working better with our neighbors. Being as the county is only 65,000 strong, it's half the size of Santa Rosa, and so we need to think in that context. We need to think as a larger group. We need to think as a more unified community. And so these overarching goals that the council adopted 2 years ago encapsulate that, and we kept them out there, even though we're starting to get more focused and drill down into some of these. The city manager took the objectives, the goals that the council relayed to us from the whole city session back in March, and picked out 5 that she believes are the most.
Well, they were the 5 that got the most votes from council.
Received the most votes from council, and they're the most attainable for the coming year. So we're presenting those here. They're also found in the city council section of the budget. First is completing that Lakeport strategic plan, followed by annexation, followed by retaining and recruiting a school resource officer and getting funding for that. Continuing to push heavily and fund as best we can road projects in the city, and then continue to build on our neighborhood watch and community programs, primarily led by the police department and community development. So, the highlights of this budget. We project this year that city revenues will exceed $18 million. That includes federal revenues from USDA to complete water and sewer projects. We have total expenditures exceed $20 million citywide. This is across all funds, general fund, water, sewer, special revenue. The reason that there's a difference is because we're using existing resources, usually in the special revenue funds, and some in the general fund to pay for one-time expenditures per council policy to do one-time things, namely the Main Street revitalization project. We've arrived at a balanced general fund. We actually projected a slight surplus originally. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later because it's not truly a surplus, but I'll get to it when we talk about the total. We're also looking at strengthening the enterprise funds. The rate structure changes are still in effect. We have 2 more years of increases to both water and sewer, and those are doing what they're designed to do. They've stabilized both revenue, both enterprise funds. The water fund is actually going to engage in capital project this year, a significant capital project is proposed that it wasn't able to do in years past, as well as build its reserves. And same with the sewer fund. The sewer fund won't be as active this year in capital projects simply because of a lack of time and personnel resources. But the Public Works District has programmed some capital in sewer, but the big push this year will be to take what budget surplus there are in the sewer fund and slot those away for future capital projects as well as continue to build up reserve. And again, we had a strong focus on cost control, completing projects, and economic development, both locally and regionally. For infrastructure, we're proposing $2.5 million for roads. 1.9 of that is for the South Main Street project, South Main Street revitalization. We're proposing nearly $8 million in infrastructure. This includes completion of the USDA water and sewer projects. And then miscellaneous items, including vehicles and equipment, equating to about $400,000, of which is about a $60,000 appropriation for public works to explore leasing a $400,000 patch truck. And Margaret may have comments about that later as to how she feels since things have changed since we received that request from Public Works and approved it. So it's in the budget, but we may still have a little bit more down the road. On the personnel side, we're looking to fully staff the city, filling vacant positions, and restoring public safety staffing to what we would consider optimal level. All right, going back to the general fund. Last year, the city manager made the recommendation to use prior year surpluses and apply them to 2014-15 to do one-time things. Budget policy allows for the use of that for one-time projects, one-time activities, one-time purchases. We aren't going to spend all of that surplus by the end of the year. We expect we're going to have close to $350,000 left over. The city manager is recommending continuing to carry that surplus forward into the next year, but not all of it. So like I said earlier, we are projecting a budget surplus. That's if we carry the entire past surplus forward. The city manager is saying, let's not do that anymore. Let's carry most of it, let's reserve some. We have economic uncertainties out there, and even though we have a sizable reserve to handle those, given what we're seeing with PERS, given what we're seeing with ancillary personnel costs, it makes sense to hold on to some of that just in case. And if we need to, we'll come back and see where things have sorted themselves out and decide if the recommendation should be the council to fully use the surplus of the past. So we're presenting a balanced budget with the use of that surplus and the using all of it. We're going to start retaining something for fund balance.
Hey, Dan,
Yes.
real quick, with that reserve, were any potential road infrastructure projects looked at with that money that can be utilized efficiently, or would it not be enough to complete a project?
Typically, we see road projects like what we're proposing here, even though we call it capital, really as a maintenance activities. We're not building new roads. We're not doing things that are one-time in nature necessarily for us. So policy says we won't use surplus for fund balance reserves for ongoing things like road maintenance. So unless the project was significant enough that said, like, we're just completely redoing this road, then it might be an applicable use, but even then it's probably going to be more cost than we would feel comfortable allocating reserve to. It is a possibility. We do have a healthy reserve, but we're facing some challenges coming up that we would like to
You'll see in some of the capital, what these projects we're doing, our new engineer, Paul Friend, has been really helpful in bringing us some new ideas. But it's very low cost to maintain, like 11th and South Main, for a very minimal cost. We'll give it another 7 to 8 years that we to continue on this road. So we're doing the minimal reserve as possible. We're going to do a big project on Bevins, but which
That'll be the largest of the year,
Yeah.
about $350,000.
yeah. So that's
But that's
a real
a
big one that we're doing this year. This is Bevins. And the rest are some really good. They're not
preventive.
patch jobs, but they're I don't know what you call them. What do you call them?
Mill and fills
Mill and
and
fills, but,
overlays.
Preventive maintenance that will extend the life of the road so that we can plan future years for more significant. Revenues are generally trending fairly flat. We're seeing upticks in sales tax like we have in the last several years. But we're a little concerned that a lot of our gains from sales tax have been in the transportation sector, notably tied to gas prices. So you pay sales tax when you buy gas, but we all know gas prices are still relatively low compared to the highs of 2010, thereabouts. So we want to be cautious when we're talking about sales tax. It's trending in the right direction, but is it going to be strong in the coming months? Time will tell. We'll see how the summer season goes, which will give us an indication as to how far it'll drop come the winter. But it's kind of what we can see. And in the meantime, our costs continue to rise as far as those ancillary personal costs I mentioned too. Retirement and health insurance. Now, health insurance, Margaret and Kelly did a really good job working with agreement to move toward a self-funding health insurance program, which is going to save the city a substantial amount of money in the coming year, as well as hopefully in the years afterward. That certainly helps with this part of it. But even in the self-funding world, we'll continue to see increases, albeit less dramatic than if we stayed with our current carrier. Just watch them continue to pile up double-digit increases on us. But it's something that's not cheap. Even with the change to self-funding, it's not a cheap benefit for the city. Whereas it used to be very reasonable, now it's very significant.
So Dan, is there a possibility, because of the fund and the super fund and all that stuff, that there could be eventual rebates if there's not a lot of claims, or is that something that's pie in the sky?
Have we ever talked about a remit, possibly rebates from health insurance if the claims aren't coming in like they do?
We're definitely going to be seeing a lot more rebates for prescription where the carrier was getting them in the past. So there'll be some more pass-throughs on that. That would be remit as a whole, so I don't know how that's going to end up filtering down to the individual cities. For instance, this year the rate was going to go up 8%, so we're going to have the same insurance benefit without going up 8%. That's our savings right now, even though it's the same price. And that's only because we're trying to fund a reserve that we have to start. So next year, we're hoping that it should be lower than what we're paying this year for insurance. So that should be going down. And we have a lot more flexibility to change the plans too. So that's what we might see in the future as things get harder, and the plans may have to be adjusted also. So, but as far as rebate, that's to come to see what that's going to work
If I
out.
might interject, my understanding is that it won't be set up in a cash rebate, but more in a lower premium for the
Right. And
following
we'll go
year.
back to remit, and we'll figure out how the cities end up.
I mean, that's my understanding, but it could be an actual cashback, you know.
Because it seems to me that the prudence of the members, to do training and different safety measures and training programs and stuff like that, because we all have a vested interest in keeping all of our costs down. And but at the same time, we should benefit ultimately either by having a lower premiums or some benefit where that would, as you said, in this case, it balances it out at zero. But if we're all remain well-trained and do the safety meetings and all the different things to help mitigate future claims, that we all have a huge interest in trying to keep this down. And if it works, then there should be some benefits in premiums or cash savings or rebates or something like
We
that.
do pay into a carrier for this, I forgot what the acronym is for it, but, so this is our first year in there, so until they get to learn better our group, they're going by some historical data, but once we're in the system for a couple of years, if we have a good, our 15 cities are staying lower and we're having, some good low claims, then that will adjust the whole system up too on the cost. Now, if it goes the other way, where people are using it excessively, then that will affect our premiums too. So it'll be for a couple of years, they'll be trying to figure out where the place is and what it's going to cost us to have it covered.
So the goal would be to find health costs are relatively flat, maybe in the future, rather than.
That's the hope. Yeah.
The other thing I could interject is that we do get rebates back currently in workers' comp and liability if we have low years of claims. So that portion is set up that way.
As far as RING is concerned, it's not truly a nonprofit type system, right? Not
It is.
completely.
It is, it's 100% funded by 15 cities. Now, we do some workman's comp for other organizations outside the 15 cities, and they're charged a higher rate for their workman's comp for being part of agreement, but still a better deal for them than going with other areas. So it does, you know, use that to help offset some of the premium costs. And they're talking about opening up the health insurance in the future. This is our first year of self-insured, but there's already lots of groups looking at us and want to get in on our health insurance. So that might be something in the future where we might do too, make a little extra money on allowing other entities and buy bigger, so allow other entities to come in and then maybe help offset some of our costs. So that's something we're looking at too.
Any other questions due to changes to general fund? Just off the cuff. Okay. Shifting gears to the water enterprise, the water operations fund. So as earlier, revenues are up as a result of the rate restructuring. Correlated to that is what we're going to experience with the drought conditions and the governor's latest declaration or executive order. Our rate structure is designed to absorb some impact from water use reductions, but it was never designed to absorb 25% reduction like the governor proposed. Fortunately, our city wanted to abide by 25% reduction. We have an alternative water conservation method that we can use that is much more suitable for things like our rate structure. So we continue to expect that our revenues will go up from the rate structure to fund both reserve as well as operations and additional capital projects. On the water side, we're projecting a budgetary surplus, so no operating deficit for the coming year, which is great news because in years past, we were projecting such things. This will be the second year in which we are seeing black. The water fund will engage in a significant capital project this year. That will be what was supposed to be the main line replacement of Geisel. But a recent issue has come up with the water surface treatment plant, which may require us to relook at that, which is will probably come back the second meeting and say, we're retooling the Geisel project in favor of this other project, which Mark may want to comment on later. But more information is still needed before we make that call. On the sewer side, it's the same story. The sewer is generating more revenue as far as compared to its expenses than water. So its reserve is building faster, and it's able to do more capital. But as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to engage in a significant amount of capital from the sewer side outside of USDA. Public Works has programmed money for certain equipment replacement, including some antiquated generators. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, you had the dates of these generators from like the 60s and the 70s that were still in service that you're looking to replace?
60s. They're Army surplus that we have, and they're what we use for power outages, and they're getting old. We're going to start parking them.
60s, we're not getting old.
Yeah.
Classic.
And another,
Season.
They were well built.
they really are well built, but they don't meet the current air quality card requirements, so we can only run them for
I
so long.
imagine they're
too.
pretty far off on that
Yeah.
one, actually. Especially if they're Army surplus.
Is that considered a classic car at that point?
We'll put them up for auction if you're interested.
So, just to see if I can remember, I was out at the sewer treatment plant and the structural periphery of the sewer ponds. Was that part of the USDA project, or is that some kind of a onerous thing
Where
that we
the
deal with
the concrete
perimeter structure
cracking.
that was falling in and?
Yeah, that is part of our application.
Okay.
We're looking into some possible budget overruns and dealing with issues in that regard.
And then there was some pumping issues about the...
Yeah, on Monday we noticed the project for the cleaning of those ponds, the sludge out of those ponds on Monday. So that's moving forward.
But in reality, the superstructure around the outside, that perimeter, that is not a huge problem if it falls in or anything like that.
You know, the
It's
concern.
more cosmetic, although it could be a long-term problem.
It's a concern if it starts to seep through.
Yeah.
And, you know, the indication of the cracking of the skirting lets you know that there's some erosion happening underneath. That's why the concrete's. So the issue has to be addressed. How much of that eroding, we're going to find out here. We're looking to find out this summer as we clean the ponds out and take it down below the concrete, get a better idea.
This was that nice graphic that I alluded to earlier about how much the city of Lakeport spends out of the general fund on each man, woman, child who calls Lakeport home. So these are residents. Depending on what number you use, we look at the Department of Finance as an annual population estimate. And at the end of, or in somewhere between 2014 and 15, they estimated our population to be around 4,700, which means for every man, woman, child, the city spends out of its general fund $805. Compared to $678 from the county's general fund and $2,485 from the state's general fund. What we'd like to always point to is how much we spend on public safety per person, as well as how much we spend on roads out of discretionary revenues. Almost 2.5 times to 1 compared to the county as far as police and patrol services. So like I said, our community is very well protected from our outstanding police force. And then we also spend close to $170 per person on roads out of the general fund, where neither the state or the county does so. They have other sources of revenue that we don't have, of course, the discretionary pot. Nice graphic here, just dividing up the dollar bill in relation to property tax. So the city collects about $860,000 of property tax, which represents about 11% of the total property tax assessed in the city of Lakeport. The other amounts go to, of course, the schools and the county, and some other various special districts. Sales tax, a little bit different. There's an 8% sales tax rate here in the city. 1% of that 8%, or 1%, I should say, not 8%, 1% is collected by the city in the form of regular Bradley Burns, and then we also have a half cent on top of that collected from Measure I, which we call the district tax. So of the total dollar, the city collects roughly this amount. The rest goes to the state, and then the state does what the state does, and either puts it in the general fund or sends it back to the cities in the form of HUDA. A small portion goes there, or various other expenditures.
So, Dan, it looks to me like if you add up Lakeport Unified, ERAF, Mendocino College, and County Office of Education, it's over 50%.
And even that's not enough as far as the school district's general fund budget.
But this is where...
That's statewide, actually, too. I think for most municipalities statewide, it's
Yeah.
close.
But this is the thing that when we do I think one of our goals was public outreach, that when people need to know where the money goes, a lot of people don't realize, why don't we do more with roads, why don't we do more of that? So, well, half of the money that we get goes straight, over half goes to education, and it does statewide, but here too, in Lakeport.
Yeah, it's mandated as well. You can't, it's done deal.
But the point I'm making is that do they understand
Right.
that that's money that we can't touch, we can't do anything with, but yet that's our future. So, my point is not that it's a bad thing, it's just that people need to understand that. And this dollar, the way it's moved, if there was like Lakeport Unified, ERAF, Mendocino College, and County Office, and it was all the way across, and they say, well, see, there's half the money right there, rather than divide it up, make it look like, oh, well, how much is that? They can't really see it. Because you guys divided it up with the Lake County in the middle there, is what I'm saying.
Oh, you want it all on one side?
Yeah, so it looks like, see, this is where your education is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that they understand that we're not trying to direct it somewhere else, but this is money we, like you said, we're mandated. I just think it's an educational thing, that's all.
Yes, it absolutely is. And this is the section right here that the city would collect on that dollar for property tax. But it is an educational thing, because most people assume, well, I live in the city, I pay property tax, I want to go to the city, when it could be far from the truth. The city just gets a small share. And most of it does go to the school. And it's ironic, because it's like half of the school's federal fund, the other half comes from Sacramento. So that's our method of financing education. Measure I, this is another great slide, there is both in the budget as well. This shows us what we expect to collect in terms of revenues generated from Measure I, the asset sales tax, and where the city manager is recommending those proceeds or those revenues be applied. So most of it is small capital projects, road-related, but we also consider parks and grounds as well as the West Shore Pool to be eligible uses of Measure I. And so it's recommended that if we were to divide that pie up, this is how it would be prorated. We all know that the general fund collects Measure I. It's legally used for any general purpose that the council sees fit. But if we had to apply it, this is how the city manager would use it, or recommend it. The West Shore Pool opened yesterday, and we like to present a basic income statement on the West Shore Pool in terms of how much do we get in revenue and how much does the general fund have to backfill. So this year, I would expect that the general fund is going to have to pony up about $100,000 to maintain that pool, because we're only going to collect about $16,000. The operating and capital costs are going to total a little over $117,000. We're still working with the county to try and get grant money that was promised to the city. But we haven't been entirely successful in getting that. And then talking to the school as well. We're talking to the school to try and figure out what their contribution is going to be to the realm of capital.
Why the massive increase in operating expenditures?
Because we're open for half the year as opposed to last year we were only open for.
The last year we didn't have any.
Oh, that's based on, okay, so that would be back towards a normal number then?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little bit higher than it should have known because we have some capital that we're programming in there. There's was it a pump or something, Mark, that needs to be replaced, $10,000.
Still need to work with the school and see how things look. I know they've got their bond proceeds that are going to put the capital.
But that $100,000 is not, Measure I has not been applied to that yet.
It's being recommended.
Yeah.
We apply
What do we do?
57,000 towards that 100. How Measure I?
Right, but that is not part of this. This net income loss is to the general fund. And if we apply $57,000 in Measure I, this gives a significant drop down.
Yes.
So to once again refresh my memory, didn't Anthony say that they were like pledging so much money, annually, or is that a one-time deal? Was that like a newspaper thing or what?
He had pledged $10,000 for the last couple of years, and then stated that because we didn't claim it quick enough or in the right way, that too bad it's gone. So we lost our, they're not funding us that last 20,000 last 10 years.
Okay, well.
So,
Did they actually say that they're not doing
pretty
it?
much, yeah, that's what they told us last year, that they weren't going to do it. So even though it was in their budget to fund us that. So we're not counting on anything this year for it.
Well, can we at least get the ball rolling on an email or a letter? If they're going to deny it, I'd like to see
Yes,
it.
Dan and I
Yeah,
have
we are.
talked about it, sending them a request to see if they're going to,
But for budgetary estimates, we're.
Yeah, I understand that for the budget, but
How do they feel if we denied their county residents admission to the pool?
I was just going to say what, maybe Mark
And that's
can-
75% of the
Oh,
usage.
yeah. What was the actual usage for out of city?
At one point, about 3 years ago, we did a survey, and it was over 70% was county residents using the pool. So,
Well, I mean, that's just ludicrous. I mean, it's not ludicrous that they're using the pool. It's
No,
ludicrous that the
no.
county is not helping
Yeah.
fund it when they're using double what our own local residents are using. We're saddling with the entire amount.
What is what's the current contract with the school? Is it just for maintenance, or is it for maintenance and operation? I thought it was a.
during, when we have the, well, actually, they're supposed to, all the capital lines are supposed to be split. That'd be agreed upon by both entities when they split the cost what's needed. And then we maintain the pool during our June, July, and August.
Operation.
Yeah, operations and maintaining, chlorine, whatever, needs to be done. And then they work with the channel cut, because the channel cuts use it more than just those 3 months. And then channel cuts work with the school during the other months that the other schools control.
Okay, so the 50/50 thing is just, it's mainly for capital.
Capital, yeah.
But there has been things that have been done where we have not received payment.
Yeah.
Like
Well-
replacement.
And the one thing about the channel cast, unlike almost any other sport, I don't know that the baseball and softball and volleyball people have to help fund the use of the baseball or the basketball courts or anything like this. And the channel cats are in a very unusual situation where they're forced to help fund a situation so that they can actually participate in the sport. And I think that seems a little unusual to me, that they're forced to do fundraising when, I don't see the softball and baseball and soccer and all that. So I think that that's a little bit unusual as well. And that's why I think the county needs to get a little bit more on board, and the school district too.
I know that,
But this is
Well,
budget.
they're not an official team.
that the,
That's one of the problems.
the school did put the pool as one of the
Yes.
priorities now with the bond funds when they're going to be doing all the renovations. So they're working through the process to get ready to do some of that spending for this project. So they have been very aggressive in working on that, or trying to get those things done.
The big thing that I worry about is that the comment always comes up, well, nobody ever said anything. So we're saying it now, that the county needs to pony up and the school district needs to pony up. But I understand Dan doing the budget in this way.
Yeah, we're just being conservative with numbers. All right, I'll try to move quickly through these slides. The federal documents and
What I might suggest, we only have 5 minutes left. We've got a lot to cover. We haven't even got to a lot of the dollar amounts on stuff. That maybe we need a special meeting to come back.
I think that would be nice, because I don't want Dan to have to blow through this. There's a lot of information here too, and I really want Councilmember Turner to not feel like it's just being swept over, because I remember when I first saw the information, it's quite a bit. So it'd be nice to
Yeah,
allow for enough time to for any
an
questions.
hour went by very quickly before we even got
I
into
apologize.
some of the major costs.
Oh, no.
So I know that Dan is going to be on vacation starting tomorrow for a week. He's in the middle of moving. So, and very well deserved after all the stress of putting the budget together. But, so I was thinking maybe at the end of next week, like Wednesday or Thursday evening. Actually, Thursday's probably better because you're back on Wednesday, but you're in the week. So, Thursday evening, like 11, so Thursday, about 5:15, and just Maria times it.
Yeah,
And
6
Councilman
o'clock.
Turner times it.
I have a committee meeting in Sacramento, so I'll be driving back to Sacramento. 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock would work for you? Would that work? No, not for you.
That's what.
No, it's fine.
Oh, sorry, for you.
I'd be.
Dan, does that work for you?
yes,
The
Mr. Chair.
11th?
Yeah, 6 p.m.
At 6 on the 11th? Okay, I think we just didn't have a chance to really get into, and we need to do that before we bring it back for about, pretty
Sure.
far from that. So, if that works, then, just 11, Thursday the 11th at 6 p.m. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Dan, and we'll move back to special meeting. And at this point, council, if you wish to take a few-minute break here.